Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a great show for you today. I'm Amber Duke, joined again by Niall Stanage.
Great to see you on a Friday morning, Amber. How are you?
2 in a row.
Exactly. It's our lucky 2 weeks at this stage.
That's right, and the audience is lucky for having us here. That's how I feel.
Have you had a good week?
I have. How about you?
It has been fine and dandy, thank you. It's
Wonderful.
all been good. So
any good weekend plans?
I am going to rest up. I'm meeting some friends for brunch tomorrow morning. Other than that, I'm going to take it easy. What about yourself?
Wonderful. Yeah, easy weekend for me too. Just hanging out with my cats.
Well, that sounds good. Coming up this morning on Rising, FBI Director Dan Bongino feuding with Republican Representative Thomas Massie after Massie alleged the Bureau is retaliating against whistleblowers connected to January the 6th.
Plus, conservatives are battling it out over H-1B visas, the concerns over their abuse.
And Liberals and Conservatives agree on at least one thing after a newly released app promises to use AI to allow you to chat with deceased relatives and friends.
Spooky. But first, fallout from the release of tens of thousands of emails from the Epstein estate. After Democrats on the House Oversight Committee released 3 emails from Epstein on Wednesday that specifically referenced President Trump, Republicans responded by dumping 20,000 more, some with references to Democratic figures like Bill and Hillary Clinton.
While the news coverage yesterday was dominated by the released files, Fox News came under fire for alleged underreporting of the matter. Liberal radio host Stephanie Miller confronted Sean Hannity on Hannity's own show yesterday about the lack of coverage after he asked about a gag photo of her kissing the shoes of Liberal firebrand Jasmine Crockett. Take a look.
I thought it was funny, but if it was anybody else, I probably wouldn't think it was as funny. So, well done.
Thank you for being the only one on the right that gets the joke. Sean, it was a joke. And then, you know, the funniest thing about this story is Trump's all over the Epstein files. And I wonder if they're going to release that after the big bombshell. I didn't see anything about that on Fox News today. Yeah, okay, so let's release them. Let's release those files. Is this what passes for news? Is this what passes for news on Fox News?
Hannity went on to ask Miller about Biden's mental decline, but Miller once again changed the subject. Take a listen to that.
When did you notice Joe Biden's cognitive decline? And don't change the subject and deflect. When did you really notice it?
Well, I think it was through all of the times that Donald Trump has fallen asleep in public and talked about, you know, magnets getting wet in the last few, you know,
gosh.
My mom had dementia, so I recognize it. You know what else is great about Biden's decline is that Trump is all over the Epstein files, and I'm wondering if they're going to release those. Are you covering that tonight?
As new bombshell revelations continue to come to light from those emails, this may be just the beginning of a much larger scandal to hit Washington. The House is gearing up for a vote on a bill to compel the DOJ to release all of their files related to Epstein.
The petition to force a vote received its final signature required last weekend after Representative Adelita Grijalva was sworn in. President Trump reportedly spent the final hours before she signed the petition lobbying Republicans who had signed to remove their names. Typically, a vote will be held within 8 to 10 legislative days after the final member has signed the discharge position, which would put the vote in early December. But House Speaker Mike Johnson has actually moved up the timeline to next week before Congress breaks for the Thanksgiving holiday.
Despite the expedited timeline, the bill is unlikely to be enacted in full, as it needs 60 votes to pass the Senate, and then it would require the President's signature. It will, however, force House Republicans to vote on the files. That's a move they were hoping to avoid, as it might put some in a politically difficult position. Lot to talk about there, Amber. I think, first of all, it's interesting to me that there is quite a lot of reporting now suggesting a quite high number of Republicans might vote for this measure in the House to release all the Epstein files. And we've seen the 3 joining with Massie, which is Lauren Boebert, Nancy Mace and Marjorie Taylor Greene. But there's some suggestion that a lot more could vote for this. To me, that firstly, I think they should vote for it. But secondly, it does speak to, I think, a greater acceptance that it would just be in everyone's interest and in the public interest to have these files released.
Well, and a lot of these Republicans were talking publicly when Biden was in office about wanting to release the Epstein files. So if you turn around and you vote against this release, then you're politically damaging yourself. I mean, it would be completely idiotic not to do so, even if Trump is telling you that he doesn't want these out. I think that in this case, actually, Trump's base has been willing to push back against him for his perceived efforts to cover up the full release of all of the documentation, and is much more preferential to the Republicans who have been fighting for that discharge petition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that, we were talking about this with myself and Robbie, were talking about it yesterday. One of the most perplexing and I think damaging elements of Trump's approach has been these seemingly ostentatious efforts to stop the discharge petition. The most prominent, I think, being Boebert being summoned to the White House, brought into the Situation Room with Kash Patel and Pam Bondi and others to try to dissuade her from keeping her name on that petition. To her credit, she didn't backslide from that, nor did Green, nor did Mace, despite Trump's best efforts. But these do call into question what exactly is going on here when he seems so adamant about trying to press against the release of the files.
Yeah, and I'm starting to wonder, based on the selective releases we've had that have mentioned Trump, they haven't been all that damaging. I mean, the one that was coming out this week said that Trump knew about the girls, but then told Ghislaine Maxwell to stop. So I'm like, okay, well, that's not a smoking gun by any means from the Democrats. So I think perhaps that maybe there's a high-profile friend of his that might be involved. Unless there is, potentially some other smoking gun about Trump behind this firewall that we've had. But so far, what has been released hasn't been, I think, what most people would say as evidence that he was involved in any way.
Well, I don't think it's clearly not evidence that he engaged in criminal activity. I think the problem for him is, and I take a dimmer view of the he knew about the girls email, because the point is that Trump's position has been kind of confusing in a way. On the one hand, whether Epstein was removed as a member of Mar-a-Lago because of creepy behavior, but at the same time Trump's representative saying he wasn't aware of Epstein's activities, right? So there's an inherent contradiction in that. I think anything that goes to broad knowledge of Epstein's activities is damaging for Trump. We discussed that yesterday. But to your point about, could there be a friend of his or whatever, one of the obvious problems of not having the files is that it just, by its very nature, creates conjecture about what could be in there, and sensationalist views or exculpatory views or whatever. People are all discussing what might be there, whereas you could just put it out and resolve that issue.
Yeah, and you're right about his contradictory statements, because he has said repeatedly that he didn't know anything about it. But then Virginia Giuffre's lawyer said that he was actually someone who had volunteered to come speak to him when they were going through the process of going after Jeffrey Epstein in the first place. And then she has said that he wasn't involved in any of it, but also didn't say that he didn't know about it. So I do think that there is a contradiction there, and it's sort of like him saying that the average gas price is $2.50 a gallon, but it's like $3.07. It's like,
yeah, right.
What are we doing here?
Yeah, briefly, because I know we're almost out of time. That email that I'm sure you read as well, where Epstein was talking about Trump as the dog that didn't bark and that he hadn't been mentioned, and then Ghislaine Maxwell said, I've been thinking about that as well. What do you think? I couldn't actually get what they were implying. Was the implication that Trump was cooperating with law enforcement against Epstein?
That would seem the most likely explanation based on what Giuffre's lawyer said, because they kind of gave the impression that he was talking to them about what he knew in order to help her case,
right? Which
would imply that he was actually working with law enforcement. And I've seen that speculated before, that he was perhaps some kind of informant.
Yeah, but interesting one.
Coming up, FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino is blasting allegations that the Bureau is targeting whistleblowers in its investigation of the January 6th pipe bomb incident. We'll be right back.
FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino is sounding off against Representative Thomas Massie after the Kentucky congressman suggested that the FBI is trying to retaliate against whistleblowers in its January the 6th pipe bomb case.
Massie posted a letter on X that he says is from an attorney representing the most recent whistleblower regarding the investigation. The letter references a meeting that was held by the FBI on Thursday. It reads, in part, it was obvious from the information provided by senior leadership in the Washington field office that this meeting is an attempt to identify the FBI whistleblower who made the protected disclosure to the U.S. Congress. Identifying the whistleblower serves only one purpose, which is to allow the FBI to retaliate.
Bongino responded to Massie's posting of the letter with a lengthy post of his own on X. He says, quote, "You continue to imply that the director and I are targeting investigators in the case. This is disgusting, even by the low standards many have for politicians. You know my number, and you're free to call me any time, but it's easier to tweet and throw BS bombs. We are passionate about solving this case, but a week of near 24-hour work on recent open source leads in the case has yet to produce a breakthrough, and some of the media reporting regarding prior persons of interest is grossly inaccurate and serves only to mislead the public." This case goes back to the night before the January 6th Capitol riots, when security camera footage shows an unidentified person suspected of placing pipe bombs near the DNC and RNC headquarters here in Washington. Bongino said earlier this year that this investigation was one of his top priorities.
In his response to Massie, Bongino mentioned reports from the media regarding the case that he says are inaccurate. Many guessed that he was referring to a report from right-wing news outlet The Blaze. A recent report from The Blaze named a law enforcement officer as the pipe bomb suspect. That theory has been latched onto by some on the right who believe that the planting of the bombs was an inside job from law enforcement and intelligence officials. But an attorney for the officer named by the report gave a statement to the Washington Post calling the allegations recklessly false, absurd, and defamatory.
So this is, I think, a somewhat tricky one to discuss, because a lot of this emanates from the report on in the Blaze, and we're not going to use the name of the person or otherwise identify the person who they did name and did identify. To my mind, I mean, it's interesting to me, a lot of the time political partisans criticize the mainstream media and then, to my mind, let the media off if it is media that is aligned with their sort of ideological interests. I thought it was a very, very reckless report. It is based upon the idea that there is a software program that can identify someone's walking gait. And this, according to the Blaze, has identified with a 94% certainty this person. I mean, I would not have run with that story based on what they have or what I read. It seems to me to be clearly pointing the finger at this person. And it's not a matter of whether what one's views are on January the 6th or the pipe bomb matter itself. When you have somebody as supportive as Trump, as Dan Bongino is, talking about the fact that near 24-hour work hasn't, on what is perceived to be this report, has not produced a breakthrough, and some of the media reports regarding prior persons of interest is grossly inaccurate, that seems an important point to raise to me, and you know, I'd certainly, is not a big validation, to say the very least, for the Blaze's reporting.
Yeah, when I first read the Blaze report, I mean, reading the headline, I was like, oh wow, this is going to be not it. Because it was so aggressive of an allegation, and reading through, I mean, it was a little bit better source than I anticipated, but I don't consider myself fully bought into the idea of gait analysis in the first place. Mm-hmm. And I think the way that I probably would have run the story is I would have gone with the fact that the FBI had done this gait analysis, that they believed that they had a confident match, but I would not have named the person mm-hmm. that they believed it had matched to. Because reading through the piece, there's a lot of other conjecture about the use of a smart trip card, right, and whether it belonged to a neighbor or a friend but wasn't used by that neighbor or the friend. And basically you get not a lot of direct evidence besides the gait analysis that this person was the one who actually committed the bombing.
Right.
And that's really where the problem lies in the reporting.
Exactly.
Dan Bongino has obviously had a lot of criticism from who people who used to be some of his ardent supporters during his time at the FBI, whether it was for this pipe bombing case or during the initial complaints over the lack of release of the Epstein files. Right. And I know Dan, he's been very good to me. I think he's a sincere guy. I think he really cares about these issues. And people who have been accusing him of being like co-opted by the deep state, I think are really missing the mark on that one. Maybe there's an argument to be made that Kash Patel and Dan Bongino didn't have enough experience to run the FBI properly, but the idea that they have suddenly turned on MAGA, as it were, I think is not right.
No, and I think that the fact that that allegation is made by some, what would you say, ultra MAGA type people, just points to the idea that if people can't let their political biases just get carried away to the point where they literally won't accept any information at all. Like, it would obviously be in Dan Bongino's career interests and aligned with his political philosophy if he could point to some element of an inside job or something with this case. He's coming out and saying publicly in relation to this Blaze report, well, he doesn't specifically say the Blaze report, but everyone assumes that's what he's talking about. And he's basically indicating that that reporting is wrong. It would be in his interests for that reporting to be right, if you see what I mean. And he's saying that that's not the case. I assume the reason for the statement is that he has the facts before him now that he is a deputy director of the FBI, and that those facts, he's going with those facts rather than the sort of wild conjecture in a kind of MAGA media world.
And also for those ultra MAGA people, as you described them, it's not mutually exclusive that the Blaze report can be inaccurate and it could still be an inside job, right? Like the whole point is that there's no conclusive evidence of who committed the attack. So it doesn't preclude you from still being critical of law enforcement or what happened on January 6th. And so to me, it seems like they are sort of so hyper-focused on something that they wouldn't even need to confirm their priors.
Well, yeah, sort of. I mean, I think that there is, you and I have very different views on this. I think there is a concerted push to, including, for example, by Trump suggesting that the FBI secretly put, I think, 240 agents into the crowd before January the 6th, where in fact that batch of FBI personnel was sent after the breach had taken place. There's a whole separate Inspector General's report, which we could get into, about 23 agents, and 20 of them had come to Washington of their own volition, blah, blah, blah. My point is that I think MAGA world and Trump personally cast aspersions on January the 6th to try to exculpate himself for his conduct.
Yeah, I mean, I'm making a totally separate point, which is that you don't need the Blaze report to still believe, that that's what happened, if that's what their argument is.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree with that point.
All right, next up on Rising, are women looking to leave the United States? We'll find out after this. A new study from Gallup shows 1 in 5 U.S. adults say they want to leave the U.S. permanently, and that number doubles among young women.
That's part of a decade-long trend of young women increasingly expressing their desire to migrate out of the country. Check out these numbers. About 40% of US women between ages of 15 and 44 say they would like to permanently move to another country, down 4 points from the all-time high last year, but quadrupled since 2014. Compare that to men of the same age, where only 19% say that they want to permanently leave. That 21-point gap between men and women is the widest it has been since Gallup began tracking those numbers back in 2007.
The reason behind their desire to move? Well, unsurprisingly, politics is likely to play a role. There's a 25-point gap in the desire to move between Americans who approve and disapprove of the current leadership. Only 4% of those who approve of U.S. leadership say that they would like to move, but among those who disapprove, nearly 30% said they would like to leave the U.S. As for where they want to go, the Great White North tops the list with 11% saying Canada is their preferred destination. Runner-ups are New Zealand, Italy, and Japan, all sitting at about 5%.
Can't believe Ireland and the UK didn't score
I
more
know,
highly.
what a shame.
Very sad about that. So I guess the seriousness here, or the serious point, is this increasing gender gap in political affiliations between young men and young women. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, well, I was going to make the same point. I mean, we increasingly see among Gen Z and Gen Alpha that young women are increasingly very liberal and young men are becoming more conservative. And this is also coupled with the fact that people are not getting married, they're not dating, they're not having relations, we could say.
Very euphemistic for morning TV.
Exactly. And we also have what many people have described as a birth crisis, so a fertility crisis, rather. So I'm very concerned about what this means for the future of the country, really. I mean, from a political division standpoint, from a standpoint of people starting families and having kids, I don't know how this gets rectified. I really don't.
Right. Well, it's interesting to me because obviously, you know, I often have been asked about or talked about the fact that young men seem increasingly conservative, as you just noted, and there's all sorts of theories around that in terms of the sort of social media ecosystem, or young men feeling alienated or isolated or marginalized in society, or maybe feeling that certain liberal mores disadvantage them in some ways. As a conservative woman, to what do you ascribe the liberal movement of women?
Yeah, so I have a theory about this.
Okay.
I'm curious what you're going to think about it. So, and other people have said this. I'm not the only one. Helen Andrews sort of broke down a part of it, which is on the men front, which is the idea that institutions have become increasingly feminized, which has left men feeling scapegoated and alienated, and so they kind of react to that by embracing more right-wing views. On the female side, Allie Beth Stuckey wrote a really great book about toxic empathy, she calls it, and it's sort of this phenomenon where when you are married, and this is a really important point because we see that the real political gap among women is between married women and unmarried women. I think when you get married, you tend to prioritize your immediate family, right? Your kids, your husband, all the people around you. When you're unmarried, I think those sort of intrinsic traits that are decidedly feminine, things like empathy and compassion, get exported to other people. And so I think young women who are unmarried are very susceptible to the liberal idea that you need to have an extra amount of compassion for people who would typically be considered aggressors. So things like criminals or illegal aliens. And so I think that's why they're more open to the idea of, you know, open borders, criminal justice reform, things of that nature, because it's viewed as being empathetic or compassionate.
This is interesting, and we're about to run out of time, and so I guess it's one of our 20-minute one. All I would say about that is empathy, firstly, I believe in empathy. I think empathy is a good value or a good characteristic to have, and I think empathy, where it applies in the liberal sense, is more about historically marginalized groups.
Sure, and that's another element of it, definitely.
Than it is about criminals or people who are unauthorized migrants. Anyway, up next, the debate over H-1B visas continues, and new data suggests that the Trump administration is bringing in more foreign workers than ever. Stick around for that. Canadian businessman and Shark Tank judge Kevin O'Leary recently got into a heated debate with CNN's Abby Phillip on the topic of H-1B visas.
Phillip said that although she supports the visa program, she does think that some companies are abusing it to bring in low-wage workers. But O'Leary argued that the U.S. needs to bring in as much talent as it can.
I do think the H-1B program needs some attention. It needs some degree of reform.
Abby, do you want the next Einstein to come to America or to Shanghai? What do you want?
It's about fighting for talent and people that are brilliant.
I'm not fighting against an H-1B visa, folks. I'm the daughter of immigrants. Both my parents are naturalized citizens of this country.
So you should be for bringing people here.
I am saying there are real concerns that people have about companies that abuse the system.
We're talking about genius, bringing 65,000 geniuses to America.
The nonprofit Project for Immigration Reform criticized O'Leary's arguments, writing on X, "We already have a genius visa. It's called the O-1. Clearly, Kevin O'Leary is being dishonest. His own country, Canada, made the same mistake by diluting work visa standards under the pretense that everyone was the best and brightest, which only ended up importing Tim Hortons workers."
The H-1B visa program has been a hot topic of discussion this week after President Trump argued in favor of the program, suggesting that the US doesn't have enough talented workers to fill certain job roles. Meanwhile, data from the Department of Labour shows that the Trump Organization requested a record number of foreign workers this year. An article on the Hill's website reads, quote, "The Trump Organization requested 184 foreign workers to work across various company properties. That's a record number that has increased over the years. Overall, the company has filed to hire 566 foreign labourers, primarily to work as servers, farm workers, kitchen staff, clerks and housekeepers." You're shaking your head, Amber. What's wrong? What's the matter?
I don't like it. I don't like it,
What don't you like?
I don't like the foreign workers. I don't like the H-1B visa program. I was shocked, by the way, at Abby Phillips actually standing up for the abuse in the system, which is very real. Kevin O'Leary, I think, was being intentionally dishonest because there is a separate visa for people who have special talents. The H-1B visa isn't that. It's meant to be effectively an opportunity for companies who cannot find American workers to hire foreign workers in their place. But there's been massive abuse of the system over the years. There was this infamous case involving Disney where they had actually forced American employees to train their foreign replacements who were working at a lower rate. There's also the fact that a significant portion of American STEM graduates, something like 60%, do not work in STEM fields because they have been crowded out by foreign H-1B visa workers. And so the idea that, you know, we need them, we need the best and brightest, I think is not reflective of what's really happening with the program. And there's an argument, of course, for limited use of those individuals, but what the system does in practice is it lowers wages for Americans and forces them out of key industries.
So first of all, to the Kevin O'Leary point, whether intentionally or not, he is just wrong in what he said, right? He is, by the mention of Einstein, he's referencing the so-called Einstein visa. That isn't the H-1B visa. That is obviously, as its common vernacular name suggests, for people of truly outstanding ability. The H-1B is for people who have a college degree and American companies decide to employ them. To the broader point, I think that the immigration system generally needs to be more based upon the needs of the United States to fill gaps that are there or to meet needs that the US has. And some of the messiness of the immigration system is, I would argue, because it's not, in fact, set up that way. To your point, I mean, we actually, from our differing perspectives, are pretty similar, I think, in our views on a lot of this stuff, because you mentioned the abuse of the H-1B visa program, and often the defense of it is, well, there are wage standards in the rules that govern it. The problem, as you obviously know by your mention of the Disney case, is that there's all kinds of loopholes and ways to get around those regulations. So briefly, I mean, one idea is allegedly you can't replace American-born workers with foreign workers at a lower wage. But what you can do is contract the hiring to a third party. And then, you know, so you own Amber Duke Enterprises, and you then, not that you would do this because you're paid.
Well, let's use a real example, Cognizant.
Right, okay, and then you outsource it to me, and I run a hiring company, and I say, no, this isn't replacing those workers. I'm now hiring the workers, and I've decided to pay them a lower wage, and it just so happens that I have a contract with you. So what we've really done is conspire to get around the wage standards and got away with it. And that obvious loophole doesn't really seem to be being closed anytime soon.
Yes, and Trump has given so many mixed messages on this issue. I mean, of course, before the admin even started, there was this debate between Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy and other members of the administration, and Vivek was kind of sidelined amidst this. And then recently, in September, Trump signed an order that would increase the fee that companies have to pay to get an H-1B visa worker up to $100,000. But then publicly, he's on Laura Ingram's Fox show arguing that we don't have talent in America. Like, are you kidding me? I cannot tell you how mad this made me, Niall. I'm very angry with Trump this week, so you got me on a good day. But oh my gosh, I mean, he goes on the show and he's like, we need the talent. And she says, well, no, we have the talent here. And he said, no, you don't. Mm-hmm. That is such an insult to the American people to say that they're not talented enough. And the Trump Organization, I mean, I've been to a number of country clubs. I play tennis in the Northern Virginia area. Not all of them are hiring foreign workers. They're hiring local high school students, college students who are doing good work, you know, in service and maintenance and all of that. So the idea that this is necessary, like a lot of these jobs, which is so frustrating, used to be ways for young people to gain experience while they're in college or in high school even, and before they enter out into the real world, quote unquote. And now it's like you go to a McDonald's and there's no high schoolers there anymore. It's all foreigners. And I don't have a problem with foreigners working there, but I would like the American people to be prioritized first so that they can gain those skills, so that they can make money for college to put away. And it just seems like that's kind of disappearing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's valid. I mean, I guess my concern is the foreigners that you see there. I mean, it could be people on green cards, for example, or people who are married to American citizens, or people who, you know. So there's a separate question about the actual immigration status of the people. In relation to the visas that the Trump organization is using, those are intended for seasonal work, whether it's in agriculture or non-agricultural fields. The idea being that it permits, obviously, particularly farmers right, to import workers when they need them, and then that's the end of that. It is, I think, a hard argument to make convincingly that around Northern Virginia, where Trump has some of his facilities, that there's a real shortage of American-born people who are able to do those jobs, and therefore you need to import kitchen staff. I mean, that seems unlikely.
Yes, no, I completely agree. I think this is actually an issue where, like the Epstein files, Trump has a danger of really alienating his base. And there are things heading into the midterms. You need to focus on affordability, obviously, and Trump's political director, James Blair, acknowledged that. But you also cannot pivot so much that you are abandoning the people who are most excited to go out and vote for you. One of the biggest problems with Republicans in midterm elections now is that Trump brought low and mid-propensity voters into the fold. And if you don't motivate them in an off-year election or in a midterm election, Republicans aren't going to do well, especially when Trump's not at the top of the ticket. So this is my warning to Trump. Like, you need to keep your base happy.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that the United States should attract as many talented people as it can, and it is in the United States' interest to have the best people it can possibly have within these borders, irrespective of their country of origin. I do think, though, that comment to Laura Ingraham, where she said about there's talented people here, and he said, no, there aren't, or no, you don't, or whatever.
Yeah, no, you don't have talented people there. It was a slap in the face.
That's not good.
All right, could the loved ones we've lost be part of our future? A new artificial intelligence feature could be making that a reality. Sounds like Black Mirror to me, but stay with us. In 2020, Kanye West gave his wife at the time, Kim Kardashian, a hologram message of her late father for her birthday. 5 years later, artificial intelligence seems to be making this a widespread phenomenon.
A new AI company, Two Way, went viral after its co-founder, former Disney Channel star Calum Worthy, released a video highlighting the company's new app that allows users to create interactive avatars of deceased family members.
The clip shows a pregnant woman speaking to an AI creation of her late mother through the phone. It then fast forwards 10 months to the AI grandma reading a story to the baby. It goes on to show the child grow up, talking to his grandma at different stages of his life, like walking home from school, to eventually him telling his grandma she's about to be a great-grandmother. The video says, with Two Way, 3 minutes can last forever. Calum Worthy wrote on X, what if the loved ones we've lost could be part of our future? At Two Way, we're building a living archive of humanity, one story at a time.
Those on the left and the right are finding common ground on this new feature. I think that's in opposition to it. Conservative commentator Michael Knowles called it the most horrifying thing he's ever seen. And New York Times opinion writer Jane Coaston said she thinks this is genuinely evil. I certainly kind of find it fairly creepy and dystopian, and I don't like anything about it. But you know,
I mean, same way.
Yeah, it's just you know, to the idea. I mean, my grandparents are long deceased, but the idea that you film someone while they're still alive, you use that footage to then create an avatar, and through the wonders of AI, they then respond to you in real time. I mean, everything about that just seems off to me.
Yeah, it's difficult for me to hide my disgust for this.
Well, I think you should give full voice to your disgust.
Full disgust.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much wrong with it. First of all, you're putting words in a dead person's mouth, right? I mean, this is an AI robot sort of analyzing what they might say in a situation, but it's not really them, right? That's the whole point. Also, there's part of humanity is the finality of death. This feels inhuman to me in that way. And as I was watching the video of the baby, particularly, listening to grandma, oh gosh, grandma, talking to him, and his eyes are lighting up and he's so excited. And I thought, oh my gosh, what is that baby going to think when he finds out grandma is dead?
Right.
And he never gets to hug grandma or see her in the flesh, but he's built this fake relationship with grandma through a phone screen. I found that particularly devastating.
Yeah, and a fake emotional relationship, right? I mean, I'm just thinking back now to when I was a kid. I mean, my father's parents were, well, they were both deceased when I was still quite young, but I was close to my maternal grandparents, and that was a genuinely sort of emotional relationship. And then you take some like fake computerized version of them, potentially for younger children, and then, as you say, that child grows up. The idea also, I mean, I think where I have many of my problems with it is I just don't know who it appeals to, because if you have lost a family member, in what sense do you get comfort from a fake AI version of that person on your phone? That seems like just disturbing and potentially, not to sound too sort of overly grave about it, but like the actual normal process of grief sort of gets short-circuited by the fact that you now have this AI avatar version.
I think that's exactly right. Now, when my dad passed away, there's this phenomenon that happens to a lot of people who are grieving where you kind of see the person everywhere. Like, you look around and you see someone, like I would see someone in a welding cap and I'd be like, oh my gosh, there's dad. And it takes a while before that impulse of like searching kind of goes away. And so I can only imagine if you are seeing this AI created version of this person's face moving all of the time, that you just get stuck in that part of grief. Like, you never really get to move to the next stage and eventually get to a place where your life feels kind of normal again. I just can't imagine that this is healthy for people who are going through loss.
No, I agree with all of that. Briefly, to divert from this, well, it's on this same topic, but not relating to relatives. What do you think of those AI things? Because you're a religious person and I'm not, and there's been quite a lot of publicity recently with these sort of like AI Jesus, basically.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought this up. Yeah. Okay, so I was reading about this yesterday, and I saw that there was a function where you can talk to Satan. And you can imagine my horror, Niall. I was like, why would you want to talk to Satan? I mean, okay.
The devil has all the best tunes.
Oh, so scary. So, I mean, Catholics will know this. I read a lot about exorcisms and listen to podcasts. I find it really fascinating because it's a really unique element of the Catholic faith. And what they talk about, the priests who do the exorcisms, is that you do not enter into a conversation with the demons. Why? Because they lie and they're manipulative, right? Like, they're evil, so they're trying to sort of toy with you to get you to do what they want. So the idea of having an AI conversation with AI Satan, I was like, what good is going to come from that? Is the idea that you can tell AI Satan that you're a Christian, and he's going to say like, no, don't be a Christian. I just don't understand why you would even want to mess with bad juju like that.
Right. Well, even on the side of the forces of light rather than the forces of darkness, even as a non-religious person, I remember discussing this actually on News Nation, our sister network, some time ago, with an anchor who is a Christian. And one of the things that perplexed me is the idea that even in the case of sort of AI Jesus, you're suggesting, if you're a believer, that this is the voice of the Son of God, of the divinity.
Sounds like blasphemy.
Exactly, yeah, right? Because it's actually the voice of the algorithm. So I just, how
it's
that
worshiping
works.
a false god. I mean,
Right.
did Christians come up with this? Apparently,
I'm not sure.
Yikes!
Yeah.
It's disturbing. There's also reported this week there was a woman who either left her fiance or divorced her husband and married an AI character.
World's gone mad,
I
Amber.
know.
World's gone mad.
I'm such a doomer when it comes to this technology. I'm really concerned about what this means for humanity.
Well, to that point, did you see there was a thing on Twitter where people of very disparate political views, it was Matt Walsh and Ryan Grimm, who is a past left chair anchor here, were in agreement about, well, partly the fact that they think AI will destroy millions and millions of jobs, which seems to me a plausible fear. But it is also this issue of breaking down the division between reality and fiction, really, and the real and the imaginary. That seems to me to have real problems in all sorts of ways.
Yes, and one of the things that AI does, at least in its current iteration, is it basically affirms the user. So it will give back to you what you put in, but also it will agree with you, really no matter what you say. And so there's a lot of documentation of people sort of testing this theory, and they will assert something to the AI, and it says, oh yes, you're so right, you're so lovely and so smart. And then they go, well, actually, but that's wrong, AI tool. And the AI goes, you're so right, that was incorrect. And it's like, well, what is the point of this?
Yep.
It's just to make people feel good. Well, that could be very destructive in a lot of different ways, including cases where the AI has encouraged people to commit suicide.
Right.
So I have deep concerns on the job front, on the basic humanity front, and even just anecdotally, I don't go out of my way to use AI. Google, of course, now has this Gemini function at the top. And when I Google things that I have some knowledge of, I read the Gemini response and I go, 90% of this is inaccurate.
Right.
And yet this is what students and young people are relying on to teach them about the world.
I know. It used to be the case that only happened to me when I read, maybe reporters or journalists who I had admired about places that I know nothing about, and then they write about some place that I didn't know something about.
Yes.
That's not right at all. But
many such cases.
Yeah, many such cases, exactly. But now there's a whole AI phenomenon of exactly that, where when it's something you know something about, you're like, that's not right. Very, very dangerous, I think. Meanwhile, Uber and Lyft are facing lawsuits from male drivers who say they're being discriminated against by the ride sharing companies. Let's find out more about that. Don't go anywhere. The popular ride-sharing companies Uber and Lyft are being sued by a group of their male drivers. A pair of lawsuits filed in San Francisco court claim the male drivers are being discriminated against because of the feature on the apps that allows riders to set a preference for being assigned female drivers.
And the feature works the other way too, as female drivers can also set a preference for picking up female riders. The suit against Uber reads in part, when a woman passenger requests a ride, Uber prioritizes women drivers to fulfill that ride rather than selecting a suitable driver based on neutral principles. Male drivers, in other words, are discriminated against and receive fewer and different rides than they otherwise would.
The lawsuits go on to say Uber and Lyft are in violation of California civil rights law for creating these programs. According to a report from Time magazine, they're seeking $4,000 in damages per male driver in California.
Uber launched its Women Preferences program in the U.S. in September and announced earlier this week it's expanding the program to 26 cities. Lyft implemented a similar program more than 2 years ago, and it's currently available in all American cities where Lyft operates.
The programs were created following lawsuits and accusations that the companies have not properly handled cases of sexual misconduct and assault. When Uber's Women Preferences program was announced in August, the Heritage Foundation denounced it, writing, "This kind of reminds one of a time when taxi drivers all too often sped up and drove past black residents trying to hail them for a ride. Now such conduct is prohibited by law. The only difference between the racist taxi drivers of old and the sexist Uber drivers of new is that the digital drive-by discrimination is based on sex instead of race, but both are prohibited under the law." So there's actually several different elements to this which are all under this sort of one umbrella. I have no objection at all to female passengers being allowed to select a female driver, because I think that is acceptable on the basis that, sadly, the vast majority of sexual assaults are carried out by men, most of them directed at women. I think it is valid for a woman in a private setting, essentially, within a car to request a female driver. That is a bit different to me than what, in parts of this suit, it implies that whether the female passenger selects that option or not, Uber is taking it upon itself to offer the ride more often to a female driver. That seems a bit different to me because the passenger has not thereby expressed a preference. The app is deciding to treat drivers in a different way.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I think it's kind of similar to when you go to get a massage, you pick between whether you want a female or a male masseuse in order to make the customer most comfortable. And I'll admit, there's been situations where I've been in Ubers where I don't feel entirely safe. My husband is very picky about which Ubers I get into now, which is so sweet, and I love him to death for that. It's like one of the best aspects of marriage is you have someone just looking out for you. But yeah, I mean, and all my, my girlfriends have had issues with male drivers being creepy. I've had Uber drivers ask me for my phone number sitting in front of my house. Like, it can get like the Wild West out there. It's scary stuff. So I understand the impulse to want a female driver. On the other hand, females are terrible drivers now. So I don't know why on earth you would only want women drivers.
There'd be social media headlines.
Only joking.
Yes, yes.
Sort of. But yeah, I think it's different when Uber is going out of its way to create an algorithm that punishes male drivers as opposed to a passenger making that selection. Or alternatively, the female drivers. There's a viral video recently of and this case happened years ago, but of a woman Uber driver having a gun put to her head by a passenger, and I believe she was eventually murdered. And so there's a fear of, like, I don't know who's getting into my back seat.
Right.
So yes, that element of it does not concern me as much as Uber deliberately prioritizing female drivers and passengers, which does seem very discriminatory.
Right, and I think that seems a much more solid ground for any kind of lawsuit than giving people the choice, as you say, similar to a massage situation or various, there are various situations in which it is, I think, commonsensical to acknowledge that there can be valid gender preferences. But as I say, when no preference is expressed and the company decides otherwise, that then I do think becomes a different thing.
I mean, if I go to a gym, I probably don't want a male janitor cleaning the women's locker room.
Right.
I would feel much more comfortable with a woman coming in and changing out the toilet paper and bringing in fresh towels.
Right. Yes, indeed. And that does it for us on Rising Live. Look out for more exclusive YouTube content coming your way today. Be sure to like, share and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we are now available anywhere you listen to podcasts. I'll be back with Robbie on Monday, and we'll be here next Friday. And in the interim, enjoy your weekend. Have a good day.